Welcome to Terror Tales. I had never imagined that an ordinary office job could turn into a nightmare. When I started at Vendors Corporation, I was thrilled. The position was a step up from my previous job, and the company's reputation was stellar. The office itself was modern, with sleek designs, glass walls, and a spacious layout. But there was something odd about the cubicles, specifically the one assigned to me. At first, it was just a feeling, a nagging sensation that I wasn't alone. Even when I was the last one in the office, my cubicle was positioned in the far corner, away from the bustling center where most of my colleagues worked. There was something unsettling about the space. The overhead light flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows on the walls, but I brushed it off as old wiring or a bad bulb. As the days passed, I started to notice more peculiar things. Objects on my desk would be misplaced. My stapler, which I always kept to the right of my keyboard, would somehow end up on the left. Files I had organized would be shuffled around as if someone had gone through them. I asked around, but no one admitted to touching my stuff. One night, I stayed late to finish a project. The office was eerily quiet, and the usual hum of the air conditioning seemed louder, more oppressive. That's when I heard a faint whispering, like voices murmuring just out of earshot. I stood up, peering over the cubicle walls, but the office was empty. My pulse quickened as the whispering grew louder, more insistent, yet I couldn't make out any words. Trying to shake off the unease, I returned to my work. But the feeling of being watched lingered, and the whispering continued, only stopping when I finally gathered the courage to leave the office. The next day, I tried to forget about what had happened. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, I told myself. But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. The strange occurrences became more frequent. The shadows in my cubicle seemed to shift on their own, as if they had a life of their own. I began to notice a cold spot in the corner of the cubicle, near the filing cabinet. No matter how warm the office was, that one spot remained icy. It was as if something or someone new was standing there. Unseen, I tried to avoid that corner, but it was impossible to ignore. The whispering, hell, became more distinct. It wasn't just random noise anymore. I could hear words, terrifying words. They spoke of fear, of pain, of something lurking in the darkness. I could feel my sanity slipping as the voices grew louder, more demanding. I confided in a colleague, Sarah, who worked a few cubicles over. She laughed it off, saying I was probably stressed and needed a break. But when I mentioned the cold spot, her expression changed. She told me that others who had worked in my cubicle before had experienced similar things. Some had quit without explanation, and others had requested transfers. She whispered about rumors of a former employee who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, his last known location being my very cubicle. One evening, after hearing those whispers again, I decided to confront whatever was haunting my cubicle. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, I stayed after everyone else had left. I sat there in my cubicle, staring at the cold corner, waiting. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Just when I was about to give up, the lights in the office went out, plunging everything into darkness. My heart raced as I fumbled for my flashlight. When I finally turned it on, the beam flickered, barely piercing the darkness. The whispering returned, louder than ever, surrounding me. Then I saw a shadowy figure standing in the cold spot. It wasn't fully formed, more like a silhouette made of darkness itself. It was tall and imposing, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight into my soul. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure stepped closer, and the air around me grew colder, the whispers turning into a deafening roar. It spoke, but the words were garbled, like they were coming from deep underwater. But the message was clear: it was not welcome. This was its base, and I had invaded it. The figure reached out a hand, and I felt a searing pain in my chest, as if my heart was being squeezed by an icy grip. I don't remember how I got out of the office that night. The next thing I knew, I was outside, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. I never went back to that cubicle again. I requested a transfer, citing personal reasons. The company granted it without question, and I was relocated to a different floor. But even after leaving that cursed cubicle, the terror didn't stop. The whispering followed me, haunting my dreams. I began to research the history of Vendors Corporation, trying to find out what could have caused such malevolent energy. That's when I discovered the truth. Years ago, the company had undergone a major expansion. During construction, a worker had died under suspicious circumstances. Right where my cubicle now stood, the details were hushed up, and the death was ruled an accident. But there were whispers of foul play, of a cover-up. It was said that the worker's spirit never left, bound to the place where he had met his untimely end. I realized that I had been dealing with more than just a haunted cubicle. The spirit wasn't just angry, it was vengeful, and now it had marked me. No matter where I went, I could feel its presence, always watching, always waiting. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, driving me to the brink of madness. I tried to escape, but there was no running from something that wasn't bound by the physical world. Then came on a night like any other. I was at home, trying to forget everything that had happened, but the whispering wouldn't stop. It filled every corner of my mind, drowning out all other thoughts. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to confront the spirit one last time. I returned to the office after hours, armed with nothing but a sense of resignation. The building was dark and silent, but I could feel the malevolent presence waiting for me. When I reached my old cubicle, the air was thick with tension. The cold spot was still there, more intense than ever. The shadowy figure appeared once again, its hollow eyes locked onto me. I knew this was its final confrontation. I stood my ground, refusing to let fear control me any longer. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice trembling but determined. The figure didn't speak, but I could feel its anger, its pain. It wanted revenge, justice for the life that had been taken from it, and it wanted me to suffer. I don't know what happened next. One moment, I was standing in that cursed cubicle, and the next, I was on the floor, gasping for air. The figure was gone, but the whispering remained, echoing in my mind. I always believed that an office job would be dull, filled with mundane tasks and endless meetings, but that was before I started at Westbrook Industries. On my first day, I was excited. New opportunities, new people, and a fresh start. Little did I know that Desk 13, my assigned workstation, would soon become the center of my nightmares. The office was typical rows of cubicles, a break room with a constantly buzzing coffee machine, and the usual hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My desk was located near the center of the office, right under a large clock that ticked loudly enough to be a distraction. Desk 13, an odd number, but I wasn't superstitious. I shrugged it off as a coincidence. At first, everything seemed normal. I met my colleagues, settled into my work routine, and quickly got the hang of things. But after a few days, I began to notice strange occurrences around Desk 13. Papers would go missing, only to reappear in the exact place I had left them. My computer would freeze at odd times, even when I wasn't running any heavy programs. And then there were the noisy soft whispers, like someone muttering just behind me. Every time I turned around, there was no one there. I tried to ignore it, but the whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing day. It wasn't just random noise. It felt purposeful, like someone or something was trying to communicate with me. I asked my co-workers if they had experienced anything strange. but they all shook their heads. If they knew something, they weren't sharing it with me. One day, out of frustration, I approached Janine, the office manager. She was an older woman who had been with the company for decades and seemed to know everything that happened in the office. When I mentioned Desk 13, her expression changed. It was subtle, but I noticed the way her eyes darkened and her smile faltered. Desk 13, she repeated, almost as if she was testing the words on her tongue. You'd noticed things, hadn't you? I nodded, eager to hear what she had to say. Janine leaned in closer, lowering her voice. There's a story behind that desk, she began. Years ago, before you started, there was an employee named Mark. He was a quiet guy, kept to himself mostly. One day, he just stopped coming to work. No notice, no explanation. We tried to contact him, but he had vanished. The police investigated, but they never found him. Her words sent a chill down my spine. And you think his disappearance is connected to Desk 13? I asked. Janine hesitated, then nodded. Strange things started happening after Mark disappeared. People who worked at that desk complained of the same things you're experiencing: missing papers, computer glitches, and the whispers. Some say it's Mark's spirit, unable to move on. Others think it's something darker. I left Janine's office with more questions than answers. The idea of a haunted desk seemed ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Mark and what might have happened to him. The following week, things escalated. The whispers became more distinct, forming words that I could almost understand. I would catch phrases like, "Help me," and "They're watching." My computer screen would flicker with strange images, dark shadows moving across the screen, too fast for me to make out clearly. And then there were the cold spots, areas around my desk that felt icy to the touch, even though the rest of the office was warm. One evening, I decided to stay late to finish a project. The office was empty, and the usual hum of activity had died down. I was alone at Desk 13, trying to focus on my work. When the lights flickered, the whispers started again, louder this time. I could hear them clearly, voices overlapping, each one pleading for something I couldn't understand. Suddenly, my computer screen went black. A single line of text appeared in the center of the screen. "Find me." My heart raced as I stared at the words. I tried to type, but the keyboard was unresponsive. The message stayed on the screen for what felt like an eternity before the computer shut off completely. I sat there in the dark, too terrified to move. When the lights came back on, I noticed something strange on my desk. A file that I had never seen before, labeled Mark Evans. Inside were pages of documents, employee records, emails, and notes relating to Mark, that employee who had disappeared. The last page was a handwritten note, scrawled in a shaky hand. "It's here." After discovering the file, I became obsessed with finding out what had happened to Mark. I spent hours going through the documents, piecing together his last days at the office. His emails revealed a man who was increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone or something was after him. He mentioned seeing shadows that no one else could see, hearing voices that whispered his name. His final email, sent to Janine, was a desperate plea for help. "It's inside the office. I can't feel it watching me. Please, don't let it take me." The more I read, the more I realized that Mark's experiences mirrored my home. I began to see the same shadows he had described, dark figures that lurked at the edge of my vision, disappearing when I turned to look. The whispers became more aggressive, filling my head with voices that wouldn't stop, even when I was away from the office. I tried to tell my coworkers, but they looked at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. Desk 13 had consumed me, just as it had consumed Mark. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could think about was the presence that haunted that desk. One night, I returned to the office after hours, determined to confront whatever was tormenting me. I had brought a small tape recorder, hoping to capture the whispers and prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. As I sat her day at desk 13, the whispers began again, but this time they were different, more coherent. I pressed record and listened as the voices swirled around me. "Find me," they said, over and over. "Find me." Then, out of nowhere, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The shadows in the room seemed to move on their own, converging on my desk. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. I could feel my sanity slipping away as the darkness closed in. I don't remember how I got home that night. The next morning, I found the tape recorder on my desk, but the tape was blank. No evidence of the whispers, no proof of what I had experienced. It was as if the office itself had erased everything, but I couldn't let it go. I returned to Janine, demanding answers. She was reluctant to talk, but eventually, she told me the truth. Mark had been investigating something at the office, something that had been there long before any of us. He believed that the company was built on cursed land, that the office was a gateway to another realm, a place where malevolent spirits could cross over. Desk 13, he believed, was the epicenter of the activity. It was where the barrier between worlds was weakest, where the spirits could reach out and influence the living. Mark had tried to stop it, but whatever was haunting the desk had taken him before he could. I realized then that I was facing the same fate. The presence at desk 13 had latched onto me, just as it had with Mark. It wanted something I couldn't give, but I had to try. Chapter 6, The Final Confrontation. I returned to the office one last time, determined to end the nightmare. Armed with the knowledge that Mark had left behind, I approached desk 13 with a mixture of fear and resolve. The office was empty, silent except for the ticking of the clock above me. The cold spot was there, more intense than ever. The whispers began immediately, louder and more frantic than before. "Find me," they repeated over and over. "Find me." I reached into the drawer of desk 13, searching for anything that might give me a clue. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, a small key, old and rusted. I had never seen it before, yet it felt familiar, as if it belonged to me. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. The shadows around me thickened, pressing in from all sides. I knew I was running out of time. Desperately, I scanned the office, looking for anything that the key might unlock. Then, I remembered Mark's last note. It's here. I turned to the filing cabinet next to desk 13. The lock on the bottom drawer was ancient, rusted over like the key. My hands trembled as I inserted the key and turned it. The drawer creaked open, revealing a small wooden box. Inside the box was a photograph, an old, faded picture of a man standing in front of the office building. The break room had always been a sanctuary of sorts, a place where I could escape the monotony of spreadsheets and emails, even if only for a few minutes. It was a small, nondescript room with a few tables, a microwave, and a perpetually out-of-order vending machine. The walls were a dull beige, and the flickering fluorescent lights gave the room a cold, sterile feel. But it was better than the alternative, being chained to my desk for hours on end. It started subtly, almost innocuously. The first time I heard the whispers, I dismissed them as nothing more than the hum of the air conditioner or the murmur of distant conversations. I was reheating a cup of coffee when I noticed a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like someone whispering just out of earshot. I glanced around the break room, but I was alone. I shrugged it off and returned to my desk, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the whispers continued, Every time I entered the break room, they're faint, elusive, like a half-remembered dream. It didn't matter if the room was empty or full of people. The whispers always seemed to be just beyond my reach, as if they were waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. At first, I tried to ignore them. I wasn't the superstitious type, and I didn't believe in ghosts or haunted break rooms. But the more I heard the whispers, the harder it became to dismiss them. They weren't random noises or static. They were words that I couldn't quite make out but knew were there. I started to avoid the break room, opting instead to take my coffee breaks at my desk. But the whispers followed me. They were fainter now, just on the edge of my hearing, but they were there. I could feel them, like a presence lurking in the background, waiting for me to let my guard down. It wasn't just the whispers, either. Strange things began happening around the office. The lights in the break room would flicker on and off, even though the maintenance team swore they had fixed the wiring. The coffee machine would malfunction, spewing hot water all over the counter. And then there were the shadows, dark shapes that moved just out of sight, disappearing the moment I tried to focus on them. My co-workers didn't seem to notice anything unusual. When I mentioned the flickering lights or the broken coffee machine, they would shrug and chalk it up to faulty equipment. But I knew there was something more. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a growing sense of dread that refused to go away. One afternoon, I was alone in the break room, making a cup of tea. The whispers started again, louder this time. I frenzied, my hand hovering over the kettle as I strained to hear what they were saying. The words were still indistinct, but I could make out a pattern and rhythm, like a chant. I turned around, expecting to see someone standing behind me, but the room was empty. The whispers continued, growing more insistent. My heart raced as I backed away from the counter, my eyes darting around the room. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, as if something was watching me. Suddenly, the kettle whistled, the loud noise cutting through the whispers. I jumped, nearly dropping my cup. The whispers stopped, and the room was silent again, but the feeling of being watched remained. I grabbed my tea and hurried back to my desk, my hands shaking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the break room. It wasn't just the whispers or the flickering lights. There was something deeper, something that I couldn't explain. I decided to do some digging, hoping to find a logical explanation for what was happening. I started by asking around the office, trying to find out if anyone else had experienced anything strange. Most people laughed it off, telling me I was just overworked and needed a vacation. But a few of my co-workers gave me strange looks, as if they knew more than they were letting on. One of them, an older woman named Karen, pulled me aside after a meeting. She had been with the company for years and seemed to know everything about everyone. "I've heard the whispers too," she said in a low voice, "but you need to be careful. There are things in this office that we don't understand. It's best not to dig too deep." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I pressed her for more information, but she refused to say anything else. It was as if she was afraid of something or someone. Undeterred, I decided to do some research on my own. I spent hours combing through old company records, looking for anything that might explain the strange occurrences. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Years ago, before the company had moved into the building, it had been the site of a factory. According to the records, there had been an accident and explosion that had killed several workers. The factory had been abandoned for years before it was eventually converted into office space. The more I read, the more convinced I became that the whispers were somehow connected to the factory workers who had died. Their spirits, trapped in the building, were trying to communicate with me, or worse, trying to warn me. My discovery only deepened my unease. The whispers became more frequent, and the strange occurrences around the office grew more intense. I started to dread going to work, knowing that the break room was waiting for me. One evening, I stayed late to finish a project. The office was quiet. The only sound the distant hum of the air conditioning. I had managed to avoid the break room all day, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing hunger in my stomach. Reluctantly, I made my way to the break room, hoping to grab a quick snack and get out as fast as possible. As soon as I entered the room, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick, oppressive, and the temperature had dropped several degrees. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, and then the whispers started louder than ever before, like a chorus of voices all speaking at once. I frenzied, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers surrounded me, coming from all directions. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel the urgency in their tone. They were trying to tell me something important. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the light switch, but it was no use. The whispers grew louder, filling my ears until I thought I would go mad. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, the whispers stopped. The lights flickered back on, and the room was silent once more. I stood there, gasping for breath, my hands shaking. Something had happened, something I couldn't explain, but I knew, deep down, that the whispers were no longer just a harmless curiosity. They were a warning. The next day, I arrived at the office with a sense of foreboding. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the break room. The whispers had been more intense, more desperate than ever before, and the darkness it had felt alive, like it was trying to consume me. I decided to confront Karen again, hoping she would tell me more about what she knew. This time, she didn't hesitate. The factory workers who died in the explosion, they never left. She said, her voice trembling, their spirits are trapped here. In this building, they're angry, and they're trying to reach out to anyone who will listen. She went on to explain that over the years, several employees had reported strange occurrences in the break room. Whispers, cold spots, even sightings of shadowy figures. Most people dismissed it as their imagination, but Karen believed it was the spirits of the dead workers trying to communicate. They're trying to warn us. She said, something terrible is going to happen, and they're trying to stop it. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't want to believe her, but after everything I had experienced, I couldn't dismiss it. The whispers weren't just random noises, they were a cry for help. That evening, I made a decision. I couldn't ignore the whispers any longer. If the spirits were trying to warn us, then I had to find out what they wanted. I returned to the office after hours, determined to confront whatever was haunting the break room. The building was eerily silent as I made my way to the break room. The flickering lights cast long shadows on the walls, and the air was thick with tension. I could feel the presence of something dark and malevolent lurking just out of sight. As soon as I entered the break room, the whispers started again, but this time, they were different. They weren't just random voiced, they were clear, distinct, and they were calling my name. I stood in the center of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The temperature dropped, and the lights flickered violently. The whispers grew louder, more insistent.